believe that the world can be more than what it is. I believe all the lives we felt will teach us how to give. I look back at our ancestors and how they used to live in balance with the planet, man. That's how we gotta live, with love being the compass. The God's way leads us home. I believe the brighter days are on the way. We gotta hope, with the love being the compass. God's way leads us home. I believe the brighter days are on the way. We gotta hope.
Welcome, everyone. I just dropped in the chat who you're listening to. That is Shutez Kaut, who is not only a hip hop artist, but he's also a highly successful environmental activist. I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. Give me a sign, because I know we're sharing a slide at the same time. Okay, awesome. So Shutez Kaut is the youth director of the Earth Guardians, a worldwide conservation organization. He's been outspoken on the effects of fossil fuels on the indigenous communities and other marginalized communities in the United States and worldwide. He's spoken at the United Nations on several occasions. He's one of 21 plaintiffs involved in the Juliana versus United States lawsuit filed against the United States for failing to act on climate change. And Shutez Kaut turns 21 this weekend. Ain't that humbling? Or ain't that a hoot, as they say these days, I think. So yeah, youth have been really energized by the state of the planet, and they've been engaging in climate action as activists and as young politicians, and they're facing the powerful fossil fuel lobby and other powerful corporations that follow a profit at all cost ethic. And there is another voice that is also gaining steam at a fast pace, and that is the voice of responsible businesses. Leaders such as yourself who recognize the impact that we have had on our climate and recognize that we must change how we do business, and also that there is a desperate need to change the policy and regulatory framework within which our society and especially our businesses behave. So today we're going to be talking about the latter part of that, the policy aspect, and focusing specifically on the CCIA, the Climate and Community Investment Act, which would provide the funding necessary to ensure that New York meets its stated climate commitments, and that all New Yorkers see the benefits of a transition to a renewable economy. So today is an opportunity for you to learn about the CCIA and the importance of your business voice. That we'll be discussing with a panel including representatives from Seventh Generation, SunCommon, and EILEEN Fisher about the importance of this legislation to them and just how it relates to their businesses. So that's why we're gathered here today. I really appreciate, we all really appreciate all of you for showing up here and taking this first step. I'll drop a link to a sign-on, a business sign-on for the CCIA right now, so you have it. But we're hoping by the end of this call, you all feel excited about this effort and motivated to take the second step, which is to sign on. I'll drop that in a second, or actually, Kate or Jake, one of you can drop that in. And so right now, I want to introduce Maritza Silva-Farrell, the Executive Director of EILEEN, Alliance for Greater New York. She's also on the New York Renews Steering Committee, and New York Renews is the coalition that is driving the efforts around, the advocacy efforts around the CCIA. And Maritza will be sharing the basics of what you need to know about this legislation. Thanks, Maritza. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here. Excited to be talking to you about Climate and Community Investment Act today. Should I just go on? Yeah? Okay,
Yeah.
well, really excited to have you all here. Thank you for joining us. I think, you know, it's a really important moment, and thank you for starting us off with such a wonderful music. Really appreciate that, Bob. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the Climate and Community Investment Act is, and you can see we're going to show a little bit of a PowerPoint that you see on the screen. But before we get there, what I want to talk a little bit about, maybe next slide, is about the problem of the intersecting crises that we are faced with today. We all know that climate change has not going anywhere. Climate change is still here with us in our communities. We see many Black and Brown communities continuing to be affected by pollution. And now with this most latest crisis that is affecting our communities, we're seeing through COVID, how, you know, folks in those communities who had been exposed to so much pollution are the ones who are also the ones who have been the most affected by COVID. You see the highest numbers of sickness are in the communities that are environmental justice neighborhoods, or named as environmental justice neighborhoods. So we have a problem ahead, and what we've been trying to do with this work is really finding a way to find the interlocking crises to find the solutions. And what is the solution? Bob mentioned the New York Renews Coalition. So we are a coalition of over 200 organizations that have been working for, I want to say about this point, about 7 years, specifically looking to move our economy completely off fossil fuels. In 2019, we were successful on passing the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership Community Protection Act legislation that is really setting New York State in the path to meet that goal of 100% clean energy economy by 2050. But in order to do that, we have to also ensure that the folks who have caused this problem of pollution can also pay for the solutions. And that's what, in essence, CCIA is. Many of these corporate polluters have been polluting our environments, sickening our kids and our families for way too long. And the way we see a solution here is that in order to be able to raise enough funding to implement CLCPA and all the goals of the state, we need to create enough revenue to do so. Next slide. And where would this money come from, right? So the way we have analyzed and looked through this is that this money will come from a fee that will basically be charged to all of these polluters, the greenhouse gas and pollution. And let's just make it clear that it's not just the emissions that cause climate change, but the ones that cause asthma and sickness. Again, I want to emphasize here that this is not just an issue about charging polluters for the sake of charging them, but rather it's just actually putting a little bit of an effort in terms of finding the funds for solutions for folks who for so many years have been getting sick because of the cost that these corporations have caused in our communities. This would raise about 10 to 15 billion per year. That would allow us to be able to invest in our communities, particularly those communities that have been affected the most. About the calculations that we were able to get with Perry study, we calculated about $55 per ton of greenhouse emissions will get us to those numbers. So let's just imagine for a moment about 10 to 15 billion dollars per year. What can we do with that? The amount of money that can help us not only move us away from this dirty economy, I would say, of the fossil fuel economy, but also ensure that we can actually rebuild and create a renewable economy that can get us to create jobs, as well as ensure that communities that have been affected the most gain access to those jobs. Next slide. Well, where does money go? So the way we think about this is specifically on some buckets of funds. Once the money comes into the state, once we are able to allocate these funds, we think that the green jobs and infrastructure is going to be the number one. We're hearing right now that the Biden administration is committed to ensure that we have our states with some funds, but we know that we're going to need even more. So there will be massive programs to build out our renewable energy infrastructure, which include public transit and obviously efficiency here. We're looking at EV vehicles, prioritizing low-income communities of color, as I mentioned before. Then we talked about the Community Just Transition Fund. What the Community Just Transition Fund would actually do is create direct support for communities, community-based organizations and projects for local efficiency, renewable energy, and resiliency projects. This money would go specifically to low-income communities of color. So if you see a theme here, we are trying to also rebuild our economy in a way that actually put frontline communities at the front and center of the solutions. And then we are thinking about the impacted worker fund. I mean, it is also true to recognize that as we move away from the fossil fuel industry, workers are going to move into a just transition. The best way to do that is also to ensure that there is enough funding for their just transition to renewable energy to happen in a way that workers can actually access to some trainings with pre-apprenticeship programs, particularly with building trade council and the unions specifically, because we're looking to create good union jobs. The money will go for the workers who might need to retire. And in some cases, some of those workers might need some more even training to be able to get into this new economy. And then the last one is the energy rebate funds. With the energy rebate funds, money will be money to lower the utility bills of low and moderate income New Yorkers. What this means is that, as we know today, low-income communities cannot access to some of these utility payments. So with the energy rebate funds, we will alleviate any potential increases or any kind of utilities that folks in the communities that are impacted the most won't have to just face with. Next slide. A question that we get asked a lot is that, isn't this bad for business? How this is going to actually affect the businesses? The question that we ask back is bad for whose business? As I mentioned earlier, the polluter penalty will be levied as close to the source as possible in terms of major fossil fuel companies. Our policy is designed to ensure that working New Yorkers and small businesses are insulated from price increases caused by basically the tantrums that the fossil fuel industry companies might throw. I mean, we're already hearing some complaints from some of the same companies right now as we are discussing this bill in the legislature. But the reality is that, again, those same companies are the ones who should be paying for the solutions that we need to actually put forward because of the pain that they cause to our communities. Essentially, the fossil fuel companies might pay a fee, but everyone will be better off with a cleaner air, water, and healthier communities. It will also reduce the cost of energy, healthcare, and a whole host of other government services in the long run. We know that this is actually critical to think about because in the concept of building a new economy, we have to think about ways in which we can see this as a long-term investment for our communities. And that's what the CCIA will do. So it's actually, the answer to this question is actually the opposite. This is good for business. Next slide. Now, the other question that we get asked a lot is about how this would actually raise the cost to consumers. Well, the reality is that fossil fuel companies pay millions to CEOs and, you know, Exxon, Mobil, PV, all of these large corporations make a lot of money and they have not paid the fair share. Can you hear me okay? I think I was on mute. Yes. Sorry, there was a little hiccup there. So what I was saying is that the fossil fuel companies actually are the ones who are going to be wanting to raise prices just because they want to continue to be getting paid this huge amount of money, like $23.5 million is what we know that Exxon CEO got in raises just in 2019. So I cannot even imagine myself to be able to access such an amount of money. The other point that I wanted to make here is that renewable energy is cheap and abundant. Like we see in other countries, we see it in Europe, that is something that we have to think about this. Any increase in gas prices will be the result of fossil fuel companies, again, trying to throw in a temper tantrum, because it's all about keeping up the status quo. And we know that that's what they are used to. And at this moment, with the movement that we are creating in New York State, we know that we can win, and we can win together against some of these false accusations that they make. Well, that said, our plan has built also at the same time safeguards, which is really important, because we want to make sure that New York families will be automatically enrolled in an energy rebate program to make sure that people and the utility prices aren't going to go up for them. Similarly, for small businesses, just in case we see that there will be a shift once the legislation is passed. Next slide. So the next thing I want to talk about is that this is not a new concept for many New Yorkers. We know that making polluters pay is popular in every county in New York State. We did a poll, and we know that an estimated percent of adults who support taxing fossil fuel companies, it's pretty high, it's over 50%. Just in 2020, we're able to just do these numbers. And I think the more we keep talking about this, the more communities across the state will be continuing to support this effort. And just to conclude, I will say that we together must win in a just transition for our state. And I'm going to be very clear with this. I think for the Climate Community Investment Act to be a reality for our state, we're going to need all of you. We're going to need partners in the movement, stakeholders from business communities, because this is a moment in which we can actually move away from fossil fuels for the reality of what they have cost in our communities. But at the same time, it is important to keep in mind that when government, private entities, the sustainable businesses particularly, and communities work together, we can actually create the economy that will serve our communities for the long haul. And I stop there, and thank you.
Thank you, Maritza. I see people clapping in the audience, so imagine you're hearing that. Fantastic. So next, I would like to, it's my pleasure, privilege to introduce Senator Parker, who has served in the New York State Senate for through several legislatures now, and he serves as the chair of the Senate Energy and Telecommunications Committee. Senator.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm State Senator Kevin Parker. I represent the 21st District in Brooklyn. I am the chairman of the Energy and Telecommunications Committee, as well as the majority whip in the New York State Senate. But most importantly for today, I am the Senate sponsor for the Climate and Community Investment Act. And this has been a piece of legislation, a concept more, that I've been working on for 3 or 4 years, and really have been proud to be selected by New York News to kind of champion this measure in the Senate. And certainly happy to be working with a longtime partner on energy issues, Kevin Kehill, in the State Assembly as the Assembly sponsor. You know, this is a critical time. And let me just, again, congratulate many of the people who are on this call for the intrepid work that you did on the CLCPA. And really, it's the CLCPA that set the table for what we're doing now. And again, once again, New York is pushing ahead to be at the forefront of the work around climate change. In New York, it is good to be in a place that I talk to my colleagues in other states, not to be debating climate change, right? Like we understand and accept climate change, not just as a scientific reality, but a responsibility that we must take up and reverse, right? Sooner than later for our children and our children's children. But the other thing too that I think that we understand here is that there's an opportunity here while we're making these changes to the way that we operate on every level to also, build a clean energy economy. And there's as any of you read Van Jones's book, The Green Collar Economy, this becomes really the next best opportunity for us to create full-time jobs at a living wage with benefits in many environmental justice communities and Black and Latino communities in specifically, and also in low-income communities across the state of New York. And so the CCIA is really the extension of the CLCPA, right? And so in the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, we set the most aggressive goals around climate change in the entire United States. Again, now we push even further in this legislation to build an infrastructure to create an economic disincentive for people to produce carbon and other particulate matter, and to more importantly, distribute the resources in an equitable way to lower energy bills, to in fact build clean energy projects, and to generally invest in the care economy in the state of New York. And I certainly see this again, not just as an extension of CLCPA, but also another national, maybe even international model for how we both deal with the issue of climate change and how we address it, and simultaneously create a economic base to in fact do that work on. Politically, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on this. The forces of evil have already started trying to redefine the bill in negative terms. There are many colleagues who feel like, well, we did the CLCPA, what else is there to be done? And I think they don't really understand how much and how deep that this work needs to go. And so that work needs to be done as well. And then some who just are just not, don't really quite get it. And so we have a lot of education to do amongst legislative members. We have a significant amount of work around agenda setting in our communities to let folks know what the next steps are. And certainly I'm here not just leading the charge in the Senate, but also as a partner in all the work that needs to be done around this important legislation. And so I'm here on this webinar as much to learn about how people are dealing with these issues in communities and what messaging points that people are using, and understanding more depth of how people believe that this legislation will impact all of our communities across the state. And so I'm going to stop here now. I want to just remind you that there's so much that we can do together. I want to leave us with a proverb that they use in Africa. It says, if you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, you go together. And so let's go together and let's get CCIA fast. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right, so I'd like to invite anyone to put questions in the chat as we go through today, and we're going to be calling your questions and sharing them with, Braden will be sharing them with the panel. But I want to take this moment to talk a little bit about ways that you can get involved. So this is the start of a series of efforts that are collaborative and with NYSBC, SunCommon, 7th Generation, and possibly some of you as you engage. Jake, can you put up the slide on 2 slides ahead, actually, on how to get involved? So in the last week of, okay, so you have taken step 1, attending the CCIA webinar. And I threw in the chat before, I'll do this again. Here's the sign-on letter that I invite you all to check out and look at, and hopefully sign on by the end of this webinar or right now. And I also want to draw your attention to the fact that if you sign on by May 10th, you have the option for your business to check a box saying that you would like to be included for essentially some free advertising showing that your business is in support of this effort. We are posting ads in multiple outlets across New York State, paid for by 7th Generation, in support of the CCIA, and your business name can be included if you wish. To do that, sign on by May 10th. and check that box. It'll be obvious when you fill out the form. I'd also like to crowdsource some ideas on how to get this out to more businesses. So actually, let's take a moment now and think about the businesses that you know, the networks. They could be specific to you. They could be more general, that, networks that we all know. And just throw it in the chat. Any ideas on how we can spread the word and get this sign on to more business representatives, business leaders across New York State. So I invite you to do that as I continue talking. And we're saving this chat, so we'll go back and appreciate any input that you have on this. This is all leading up to an advocacy day that will happen over 2 days, May 26th and May 27th. There will be the afternoons of both of those days. So we invite you to participate in that. If you have not participated in an advocacy day like this, it's empowering. You will have opportunities to talk with elected officials and senior staff about why the CCIA is important to you and your business. So I invite you to keep an eye out for that. We'll be following up with everybody about that. And yeah, the fourth item there is spreading the word. This, as Senator Parker just shared, we really need to, this is a long haul, and we need to do this together. So more hands on deck, the better. Thank you, Stefan, sharing Senator Parker's contact info. And with all that, we will come back to this at the end of the hour, and I will recap this as well. And we're going to open this up for those who wish to stay past 4 for any kind of additional Q&A catch up at the end, and also a roll up our sleeves discussion around how to get the word out about this. For those who wish to stick around after 4 o'clock, you'll have a smaller group discussion and a way to participate at a deeper level, and everyone here is invited. All right, so now let's transition to the panel. Jake, I'm not sure if you have a slide for that. Awesome. Oh, that's great. So I will introduce Braden actually, and I'll leave it to him to introduce the panel. Braden Crooks will be moderating the panel. He is the chair of the steering committee for the New York Sustainable Business Council. He's also a founder and partner of Designing the We, which is a social innovation firm in New York City. Braden.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much to Senator Parker for his great words, and Maritza about all the explanation that, of the CCIA. It's my pleasure to get to introduce our panel today. And you get a great screen share here with lovely pictures. So we have Kate Ogden of 7th Generation. She is the Advocacy and Movement Building Manager at 7th Generation. We have Susannah Bradley from SunCommon, who's their marketing director, and Elizabeth Richman from EILEEN Fisher, their general counsel. And I don't know if we'll keep this slide up or if we just want to go back to our regular screen, but you may want to, you can keep it on the, yeah, this is great. Thank you all so much for coming on today with us to talk about this. You're incredible advocates and business leaders in this whole space and in this movement. And we really appreciate each and every one of you for being here and lending your voice here in New York State. Kate, I'd love to start with you. 7th Generation is definitely a brand many of us will be familiar with in sustainable products and really wonderful environmentally friendly products. But you know, this is a little bit different. This is getting into the climate movement and climate change. And I'm wondering if you could speak to a little bit why it's important for an organization, a company like Seventh Generation, to get involved in climate advocacy.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to everybody for joining. It's very exciting. As Braden shared, I'm the Advocacy and Movement Building Manager at Seventh Generation. And Seventh Generation has a long history of advocacy and activism, but traditionally it's something that always focused pretty closely to on our products. So we've worked on toxic chemical reform and on ingredient disclosure. But like a lot of companies, we have a pretty robust sustainability agenda, and part of that was setting goals for reducing our carbon emissions. And when we set those goals, we felt very strongly that we had to take responsibility for the full life cycle of our products' emissions. And when we mapped that out, what we came very quickly to realize is that over 90% of the emissions that are associated with our products come in the consumer use phase. So they come when consumers use our products to wash and dry their clothes and to wash and dry their dishes. So we can have the most robust sustainability program in the world. You know, we can continue, and we do continue to work on our manufacturing and our ingredients, our packaging, all of these pieces. But at the end of the day, the improvements that we can make there are really a rounding error when you look at the total impact that use of our products has on the planet and on the climate. And so it was an important turning point for us in realizing that we needed to move past just having a sustainability program to truly having an advocacy program and to understanding the climate crisis in a systemic way, and being advocates for the type of systemic changes that we need to accelerate a just transition to renewable energy. So the only way that our consumers are going to have the ability when they are using our products in their homes is for them to have access to clean and renewable energy. And we want to make sure that transition happens in a just and equitable way. So we work with movement partners that really have that at the center of the work that they do, like New York Renews.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm already bubbling with questions for you. So, and if you are too, please put them in the chat, because we're going to get to them, but start putting them in, just put them in as you think of them. And just thinking, I love the point that it's not just the business and what you guys do and like, okay, once the product's out the door, then that's it. Actually, we're all interconnected here. And if you really want to achieve these goals, you have to think that way. So specifically from that kind of broad sense down to specifically the CCIA, why are you guys advocating for that?
I feel really lucky that, with the relationship that we have with the New York Renews Coalition, we were able to support the passage of the CLCPA in 2019. And this, that piece of legislation has really set the tone, I think, for the federal level as well as for the state of New York. So when we think about the type of policy that we need to see around the entire country, the work that New York Renews is leading and the leadership that New York State has taken is really setting that tone. We've seen President Biden's, Justice 40 initiative is, language taken pretty much directly from the CLCPA and the work that these folks have done. So, I think that seeing the CCIA as a critical component to the implementation of the vision that was laid out in the CLCPA is the primary reason that we have wanted to make sure that we're engaged, to make sure that our legislators are hearing from business voices of not only the business case. For obviously, no business is going to have an easy time as our planet becomes increasingly unstable. So it's there, but also I think just the principles that we hold around accelerating the just transition and doing that in a just and equitable way. These pieces of legislation are what I see as the benchmark for that work.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we'll come back around. And again, I'm starting to see questions, so please, keep doing that. And I'd like to turn to Liz. EILEEN Fisher, similar, very aligned company and values. You guys have been doing amazing work here in New York with the sustainability of your products. But now, turning towards the customers and communities that you guys are working with and engaging directly in policy work. So what has prompted that change and shift to work right on policy?
Sure. So first, thank you for the opportunity for being here. I was connected to this group through Kate. So thank you, Kate, and thank you, everybody, and Senator Parker. EILEEN Fisher has a long history of viewing our products and our business in a holistic sense. And it's something that goes straight back to EILEEN, and I'm very proud to be working for her. But she thinks about everything in a circle, from how product is made to how it has an end of life. And unlike seventh generation, our carbon impact is largely in the manufacturing part of our circle. So we've been thinking a lot about, for years, about how to reduce the carbon impact of apparel, of making apparel, and of disposing of apparel. And frankly, we believe everybody needs to hold hands and move forward on that. And the push into advocacy from the focus on the way we do our business and the way we communicate with our customers and our partners is the realization that no individual business, no individual person, no individual supply chain can do this alone. This requires collective action, and it requires partnership among private industry, and it requires partnership with the government. And then I'm going to preempt you and move specifically to the CCIA if you don't.
Go for it. Go for it.
It is important to kind of think about the sustainability agenda in a larger sense. And I don't want to kind of repeat a lot of what has been said, but in terms of being interconnected, we're all interconnected, but sustainability from a climate crisis standpoint is connected to the way it impacts our communities. And I think the CCIA does a fantastic job of making that direct link. And it's something that we support. And, to kind of get to a couple of other points that have been raised today, how do we talk about this in a way that is business friendly? Because, we're a business. I'm here with my business hat on. We would all be, businesses are creatures of the government. So, we all need to recognize that we exist because the government has created the corporate form, and we need to be therefore engaging with our government. You don't get to kind of step out of the role of citizen when you put your professional hat on. Secondly, we love New York. We love operating in New York. We're headquartered in New York, and we love that New York is thinking in a forward-looking manner about acknowledging the climate crisis and figuring out how we can move from climate crisis to climate correction. It's very important for us to be in a state that reflects our values. And I think that's important for a lot of businesses, and it's becoming increasingly important. And we all know that. I don't need to, run down the list. So, it's creating an environment that is great for businesses. It's great for progressive businesses, great for startups, great for young businesses. And it's going to bring, it's going to help lift up existing communities, which is going to help create a better workforce, better customer base, but it's really all of those themes. And then finally, pardon me, we all bear the cost of the pollution, individuals and businesses. And so allocating that cost to where it belongs is something that actually also benefits all of us. And I think it's important that all of us take those points back into our individual businesses, talk about them, and then figure out how to get them back into the conversation around the CCIA.
Yeah, thank you for that. And so turning a little bit, Susannah, I want to talk to you about the solar industry in New York. And, the need is obviously huge in terms of the build out of energy here locally. What do you think the passage of the CCI would mean for the solar industry in New York State?
Thanks, Braden. It's a great question. And it's very specific, but I'm happy to get into the solar industry angle on it because it would be huge. And let me just to give people a little bit of context, let me review a little bit more specifically what the CLCPA set out, which we've all kind of been giving a high five to. Is very progressive legislature that we passed in 2019. It was the most progressive legislature in the country. So we're kind of leading the country with this. but it set extremely ambitious targets, as you might imagine. One of the short-term goals is to install 6,000 megawatts of solar by 2025. That's in, what is that, 3.5 years? And to give you some perspective on that number, we installed about 600 megawatts last year. So, wow, that's a lot of solar we need to install in the next couple of years. To do that, the industry would have to grow about 25% a year for the next, 4 or 5 years. So it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work. And the existing funding that we have through NYSERDA isn't going to meet that 6,000 megawatt goal. So we need to find more funding. So first off, the CCIA is going to enable us to find the money and the funding to get all those megawatts installed. But secondly, it's just a huge opportunity in terms of jobs, right? The CCIA also is providing job training and job support. And we just need a ton of people in order to install all of this solar. So there's jobs, there's the money to actually do the projects. And then of course, there's this whole local aspect as well. An enormous amount of money is going out of state every year, every day to purchase fuels, to give fossil fuel companies subsidies. If we are creating our own energy in the state, all of that money flowing out of the state stops and it stays in state. It goes to local contractors, local people who are actually building these arrays. So it will be absolutely huge for the economy. It will be absolutely huge for our climate goals and for jobs. And the fourth thing, really, everybody's kind of touched on this, but equity. It's a big thing. There's a lot of well-meaning people in the solar industry, like SunCommon, who are putting climate at the heart of their work. And there's a lot of people in the industry who kind of see renewable energy as just an amazing financial investment. It's like the Ford company in 1914, like, let's get on that train. The system is changing. Neither of those groups necessarily have social equity at the center of their worlds, though. They have different kind of focuses. As a B Corp at SunCommon, we try to use our business as a force for good, much like both of y'all. And so we've started to work on these things more directly in the last year or two. And we look around and we're kind of surprised at how few solar companies are really making that connection to environmental justice and climate justice and social justice. The intersection, as Maritza was saying, it's such an important thing to recognize and work towards. The NAACP called out solar for not doing enough to be diverse enough even 2 years ago. So there's a big opportunity to, with this legislation, that this could be a transition to a better energy system in many ways. It's not just a better energy system for the earth, it really is for our communities. It could be a much more just and equitable system. So in summary, there's funding to make enormous shift to renewables, which are great for the climate, it's great for the state economy, it's great for the solar economy, and there's an opportunity to make it so much more equitable and give these really good jobs to lots of people who need them. It would be really big for the solar industry in New York.
Yes, yeah, just a tremendous opportunity, that we have in front of us. And to the point of meeting the goals that have been set out, right? That takes dollars, and that's what we need here. I want to transition to start taking some questions from the audience. So again, I see a lot of y'all on your faces. Please be putting questions, anything you're thinking in the chat, and we'll be connecting to them. I also, before we transition to that, want to once again plug. So you've heard, just all these amazing reasons for businesses to get involved. Please do sign the sign-on letter. Please, get involved. We have the lobby day. Really want to encourage everyone here, connect with NYSBC and connect with everyone on the call to talk more about it. Bob just put the sign-on letter in there again. He's going to come back to it at the end. I'm noticing, thanks Adam for putting this question in the chat, right, which is that you have the New York State Business Council, it's not sustainable, mind you, and that, coming out and advocating against this bill, even though we know how needed it is to achieve climate goals and equity goals. And although I don't want to necessarily, I want to keep the attention on you all, so I'm not necessarily going to go through the talking points as he's saying here, but I'm curious, and this is to all three, you know, why is it so important for a very different business voice to be advocating for a different economy? You know, given that for so long we've heard business voice being on the other end of policies like these, you know, how do you see business playing that role, and you know, playing the counterpoint as Adam's suggesting here?
Is that to anyone in particular? Do you just want us to jump in, Braden?
Just jump in.
Okay. Well, I'll share a couple of things, which is one, the New Yorker News Coalition has put together some really incredible resources, and we'll follow up after this call, and including a really comprehensive FAQ that I think would be really helpful. So to that question about talking points, you know, I think that we can follow up with some of those resources so that everyone here has them, and can sort of at your leisure explore and take a look at that. I can share sort of my perspective from seventh generation on this piece. You know, I think that, I mean, Maritza did an amazing job, I think, sort of teeing this up, but I think we're all aware that, you know, the business community has not always been, has often been sort of on the side of upholding the status quo, and that when it comes to the climate crisis, you know, that has often been the case as well. We are also swiftly getting to a point where, you know, this change is happening. You know, the renewable energy transition is going to happen because it has to happen. I know that, you know, as we, for seventh generation, as we look at, you know, the health of our business and our ability to be successful, you can point to something like Superstorm Sandy, which ground our business operations to a halt for over a week. So that was a huge loss to our business, not to mention the billions of dollars in economic losses that caused nationwide. So I think the sooner that the business community can become, again, going beyond sort of the stance of, I think it is a good place to start to say, what is my business's impact on the climate and how can I reduce that as much as possible? But the sooner that we can move to understanding the climate crisis as a systemic problem that impacts all of us, we are literally all in this together when it comes to the climate crisis. You know, that is such a powerful voice for change. Because again, historically, the business community has a huge voice and huge influence in public policy making. So there's an opportunity for us to all step up and ensure that not only are we advocating for the clean energy transition that we know is coming, but to advocate for that in a way that is just and equitable.
And to build on what Kate said yet again, you know, the idea that the business community is a monolithic entity, I think, is a misnomer, and one that really does perpetuate supporting the status quo. I think when legislators, when people understand that there are businesses that acknowledge, take very seriously the climate crisis and their role in correcting it, you know, it breaks the stranglehold that people have on only pursuing policies that, you know, create the lowest tax structure for certain businesses. So that's why it's important to get out there and talk about this from a business perspective also.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why we're here today. So I'm just looking through the chat here, you know, at questions, and I'm wondering, you know, one theme that's come up, and I'm wondering, maybe Susannah, I can ask this to you, is to kind of expand upon the equity question, because I think that, you know, when you look at both the climate crisis and climate resiliency and neighborhoods and places that will be on the front lines, that is going to be our most vulnerable communities. And at the same time, often really the last to benefit from the economic pieces here. So how do you see the CCIA, you mentioned it before, but bridging the, you know, that those questions.
Yeah, thank you. It's important to keep recentering, I think, the equity question, because it is one of the most powerful parts of the CCIA. It could be so transformational. And there is lots more info on nyrenews.org for anybody who's interested to see it. But I think one of the interesting things in there is this idea of community ownership, because very often we see the people who are not only owning solar companies and working in solar companies, but are financing solar projects tend to be mostly white, mostly wealthy, and mostly male, and sometimes out of state, not even necessarily local. And if we are really going to expand the economic opportunities of this really cool transition that's about to happen, we do need to make sure the ownership of these things are within the communities that are all around New York State and that don't just look like the owners of them now. So that's a really cool provision that's in there. There's also lots of job training, which is really exciting for us personally. Actually, just shout out, we are hiring, just coincidentally, just wanted to throw this out there. We are hiring for so many roles right now. If you know anybody who wants to get involved in the solar industry, please share suncommon.com/jobs. We are growing a lot and we need a lot more people. But job training would be huge for the whole industry. That's also very important. And I might also throw it to Maritza if she wants to speak more directly on this too, because I'm sure she has lots of good points to add. I don't know if she's still there.
You're muted if you want to close this out here last.
Yeah, jump in there.
Yeah, no, I'm here. I mean, I love talking about jobs is my favorite thing to do. I love talking about jobs, especially when it comes to training workers. We have such an opportunity right now to retrain the workforce that is coming off the fossil fuel industry. And in order to make sure that those jobs are career jobs, we have to make sure that happens. And particularly when we talk about, what kind of good jobs those are, I think with the CCIA, we are aiming to make sure that there is prevailing wages, that there are agreements and training facilities with the building trade unions. That's the kind of thing and the kind of partnership that we need to have to make sure that those jobs really shifts the dynamics of power between workers, between businesses, and that the real collaboration takes place, because I think business can be a really good allies on all of this, and we can shift the way our economy really works.
Absolutely. I think that's a great note to pause on. As Bob mentioned, we can come back after 4 and do a little bit more open Q&A, maybe just let folks unmute. But we want to close this out, and I'll pass it back to Bob for that.